Hey everybody, welcome to The Bottom Line. I'm Paul Revere. Tonight I have a public service announcement to make. You see, oneth by land, twoeth by sea, the Beatles are coming. The Beatles are coming. All right, folks, so first of all, I gotta say, tonight's video is a very special video for me. You see, it was 2 years ago next month that I produced my very first rock and roll video, and the channel literally exploded. That was the first video that I had actually gotten over 1,000 views. Of course, last year, 1 year later, I covered the remix and the reissue of Revolver, didn't I? And I gotta tell you, I thought I would be covering Rubber Soul this year. I think a lot of us were expecting a remix on Rubber Soul. But it was this year that the Beatles threw us a curveball by announcing that they were going to remix and even add bonus material to their famous Red and Blue albums. And those two albums would be released in connection with what is being billed as the Beatles' very last single, entitled, no surprise, Now and Then. All right, now we're going to get to Now and Then in a moment. It'll kind of come up as we start to discuss these two new releases. You see, each album was already a double album, and now with this new release, they are now becoming a triple album, and through a box set, a 6 LP album. That's a total of 75 songs, folks. And George Harrison, for the first time, is represented by 8 songs, or 9 if you include the fact that Octopus's Garden is going to be on this. He helped Ringo co-write that one. Now, George Harrison wrote about 10% of what the Beatles put out, and he's well represented, finally, on these two new releases. Now, the release of these albums was the brainchild of Alan Klein, not my favorite guy in the world, but he did do two things, I think, for the Beatles. First of all, he was behind the genius of releasing the Hey Jude album, an album that needs to be remixed and re-released, just in the fashion that these two albums have been. And of course, later, he was behind the releasing of the Red and the Blue albums, so he wasn't a total waste. And when you think of these 3 albums, and with the release of the new material, I gotta tell you, they come hand in hand. Now, why is that so important? First of all, these aren't my favorite Beatle albums, all right? But I have come to begrudgingly acknowledge through people that I truly respect. I'll give you an example. Bruce Colón from the R&B Show. He loves these albums because they introduced him to the Beatles. And then he went back and he bought the rest of the Beatles. And I think a lot of second generation, third and fourth generation Beatle fans have found them in the very same fashion. So these albums, whether I like them or not, are extremely important. And to be honest with you, I've always acknowledged that I liked the mixes on the album, and I loved the track listing on the album. I thought they went very well together, all right? They are good albums, good recordings. But now with them being remixed, and remixed with the same technology they used to remix Revolver and Get Back by Peter Jackson, what could possibly go wrong? Well, one problem I see is that with the adding of an entire disc, in other words, making both these double albums, triple albums, the price is gonna go up. Often, people would get these albums because they were a cost-effective way of collecting a lot of Beatle material without having to go back to their original albums. That's how people were introduced to the Beatles in the second generation, quite often. So as triple albums, the price will go up. Of course, vinyl has gone up, CD, everything has gone up. especially these days, as triple albums are they the gateway they once were. Now, all along, there were a lot of hints that the song that we were going to get as a single was Now and Then, and we're not surprised to find out, yes, indeed, it is Now and Then. And there were also hints that Free as a Bird and Real Love would be included on the album as well to kind of put these post-John songs together. That didn't happen. And because of this new technology and the fact that there are Rubber Soul songs, almost 1/3 of Rubber Soul is going to be included. I gotta tell you, I think that's an insult to Rubber Soul. First of all, Rubber Soul is rock and roll's first album, folks. Not even the Beatles had put out an album proper until it came to Rubber Soul. Oh, they had albums, what they called albums, but what I mean by an album is an entity, a recorded entity to be listened to from track one to track end. And Rubber Soul was exactly that. Rock and pop's first true album. And look what that started. Classic rock. That's the start of classic rock. What is one of the earmarks of classic rock? Album-oriented bands. Now and Then is going to be released on November 2nd, with the albums proper being released on November 10th, just in time for the silly season. You know what? In that first video I was talking about, my first rock video, I had mentioned in that video that the Christmas season doesn't quite seem like a Christmas to me if there's not a Beatle release. Many of the Beatles releases were released at the end of the year, just in time for Christmas. I mean, if there wasn't a Beatle album under the tree, it wasn't quite Santa, was it? Now, to even build up the excitement even more, on November 1st, they're going to release a 12-minute documentary on the single Now and Then. Now, why is this single such a big deal? Well, first of all, they're billing it as the Beatles' very last single. And through Jackson's technology, evidently we're going to get a really nice version of Now and Then. The real question is Now and Then, as a song, Beatle worthy? Now, on the website, it mentions that Paul McCartney is one of the arrangers for the orchestra on this. Of course, Paul has never been trained in music at all, but with the help of computers, he plays on a keyboard. It writes down the notes for him. I mean, that's what he's done for his own orchestra-oriented albums, hasn't he? So that's kind of exciting, especially if he nails this. Because when the Beatles went with an orchestra, you always knew it was the Beatles. It was their whole approach. Now, George Martin had a lot to do with that sound, but Paul McCartney would often hum to George what he wanted the orchestra to do. He would even say, I don't want too much vibrato on the violins and all of that. So here he is at 80. He is an arranger, folks. So I'm excited about that part of the song. I fear we're going to get some rhythm guitar strummed by George, who really was disinterested when he was actually recording it, but we'll see. By the way, Now and Then will be on the album as well, and it will be on the third disc, side A, first cut, which I find interesting because the last cut on that third disc is I Want You, She's So Heavy. So this whole bonus section starts with John and ends with John. And with only 4 songs on that second side, I wonder what we're going to get with that last song. Will they bring in the additional recordings after that dramatic cut? We still have that dramatic cut on the original album. Give us something new here. Now, it's on the Red album. I'm not so impressed with the bonus disc material. And the reason for that is it contains stuff that the Beatles didn't write, just their recordings of songs. And really, that's how the Beatles started off to begin with. They would do about half their material and then half covers. But the curmudgeon in me doesn't want those songs on this album. As a matter of fact, they should have put Don't Bother Me by George Harrison, giving him 9, or like I said, if you include Octopus's Garden, because he helped co-write that song, even though he's not credited, he would have 9.5 cuts on this release, and that would even be better news. Of course, with this release, you can get it in black vinyl, you can get it in red vinyl, you can get it in blue vinyl. With the single, all right, you can even get it clear. And let's talk about the single's cover. What a non-event that thing is. You know, I've heard a lot of criticism about the Rolling Stones' new cover. I love that cover. I think it's wonderful. But everybody goes, it's not Stonesy enough. I do agree with them. On the gatefold, that's where they should have had a picture, a black and white picture of the Stones in the Hackney district, right? But what the heck is this cover? Now, I heard the guy that did the cover for this is a real up-and-coming hot commodity these days. Not with me, he ain't. What a droll piece of work that is. But it's not the cover that we're interested in, is it? We still have questions on this single, don't we? The Beatles have said they've used artificial intelligence. Then they walked back their statements, with Paul saying, oh, we grabbed John's voice and we grabbed his piano, we flew it over and all of that. But there's been more than hints that they've even gone as far as to de-age Paul's voice to match John's voice. Of course, for me, the second that happens, I'm probably not going to like it, but never say never. I mean, these are the Beatles, and it is a single with all 4 of them on it. And it wouldn't be the first time that George Harrison was relegated to disinterestingly play rhythm guitar or a bass. So that doesn't take it out of contention for me. I've heard past recordings of this song. I don't think it's one of John's best, but Paul McCartney's now putting his 2 cents worth in, and let's see what ensues. All right, folks, so my question to you guys tonight is, what do you think of this release? Are you excited? Were these albums gateway albums for you? Did you discover the Beatles through these albums? And what do you think about them becoming triple albums at this point? All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. I'm Michael Noland. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. That helps channel growth. And if you're one of my many viewers who haven't subscribed to the channel as of yet, that's easy. All you have to do is hit that subscribe to the tribe button, tap that top bell icon, and you'll be notified of all of my future videos. All right, folks, I want to hear from you. I'm Michael Noland. This is The Bottom Line, and you and I, we are the tribe. I'll see you in my next video.